I will not be using any PowerPoint because that sometimes make us powerless. I have two stories to tell about how ethnic conflict has been managed in India, and then I'll have a slightly different but linked story about how it was done in the case of India's Northeast. So as far as the first point is concerned, first story, at the All India level since 1950 or even before, let us say 1950s, broadly I would suggest that two processes operated. I mean, they combined together, not always in harmony, that is democracy and federalism. Sometimes democracy is taken for granted, but in India it has been a challenge because democracy in a multi-ethnic country, it creates sometimes insurmountable problems, and it raised doubts about a possible disintegration of India in the 60s and 70s. But India has managed to combine the two, that on the one hand, ethnic recognition of ethnic identity, that was a nationalist pledge to the people and also incorporated into the Constitution of India. So that recognition was available, not so easily, but then there was popular demands, movements, popular pressures, and other things, which are again permissible under the Constitution of India, a democratic constitution. So people mobilized, people reminded the leaders about their pledge. So in many rounds from 1956 onwards, this ethnic recognition of ethnic identities through some form of territorial power sharing, it worked. It worked, and this has been extensively researched by scholars. I have my own writing on that. Post-56 problems, post-integration problems has also been taken up. The issues, unresolved issues, have been taken up by other scholars. For example, Pai and Asa Sarangi. Asa is here. I also is working on those issues, the non-territorial problems of accommodation in India, because territorial solutions have not been able to resolve all the problems. We have minorities, large in number, spread all over India. So that is an issue. About federalism and democracy, I have developed a conceptual distinction and published it also between what I have called diversity claims and equality claims. Diversity claims in India have been privileged over democracy claims. Now, what did I mean by that? Diversity claims mostly refer to the question of identity of various kinds, ethnic, regional, religious, like linguistic, tribal, and democratic problematic refers to distribution of income, wealth, and other things. So these two problematics have combined in the case of India, but the first problematic has been privileged because it was very sensitive. When you mobilize people on language ground or religious or other grounds, you actually appeal to the emotions of the people, their sentiments, they easily get mobilized. And it has been the case that by recognition and by also conceding to some territorial power to the ethnic elites, it has been found out useful to displace governmental responsibility lower down to the state level, so that yesterday's rebels becomes today's and tomorrow's stakeholders. So yesterday's violators of the law and order become the guardian of the protection of law and order. So that has been rather an easier solution. Now, what about democracy? What about the democratic solution? It depends on the political parties, depends on the programs of the elites in power, and therefore it has varied from state to state. In some state, depending on the political parties in power, more democratic activities have taken place, more redistribution of land and resources have taken place, and they have performed well in the current language of the UNDP, that is equality adjusted human development index. I made a comparison just in brief once between Gujarat and West Bengal before 2011, and I found out that when you compare per capita income between these two states, Gujarat of course was very high. The moment you take into account the inequality adjusted human development index, if I found out statistically that Gujarat comes down and West Bengal under the left, it actually goes up. So it depends on the particular state government. But in any case, it has this model, this has worked in India. In the mainland, not without any violence, but mind you, it is a very large country, and by one estimate, most of our linguistic problems in the mainland has been resolved. It is claimed by anthropologists. Now going to the northeast, which is a very difficult region, long known as India's insurgent country. Insurgency, political violence, killing, continuous killing, persistent killing of people, this has went on for a long time. And once upon a time, we used to refer to it as India's internal civil war zone. So that story was there since independence. But at the same time, there was also another story of how to accommodate, how to bring the rebels to the discussion, to the table, how to engage themselves into some negotiation for political power and territorial autonomy. So this process also has gone hand in hand, and the thing is that for a long time, until about the 1990s, while the rest of India enjoyed democracy, various kinds of rights, decentralization and other things, in the northeast of India, it was difficult. It was not easy, not because the rulers in India were reluctant, but because Northeast was and still remains very diverse. Its diversity is immense. It does not compare with any other part of India. I have, of course, the PowerPoint, but I have got the printout. Just a few examples. In each state, there are many ethnic groups with their distinctive identities. In 8 states now, Sikkim added in 2012, 4 states do not have any majority ethnic community. And the other 4 have majority community, but minorities are very large in number. Those who are more familiar with the details, they perhaps are aware that how difficult it is. The problem of recognition is not a problem. I mean, recognition of an identity, linguistic identity and other identity, because there are non-territorial provisions in the Constitution of India between Article 25 and 30. But the thing is, when it is conjoined to territory, because how many local governments, how many tiers of territorial governments you can have? Because in Northeast, there are 8 states, and within 8 states, there are altogether 10 tribal autonomous district councils operating. And their size is not very large. And financially, they are all dependent on the state government and the central government. So they have autonomy as per the 6th schedule of the Indian Constitution. They have their government. It's like a state within a state. I have visited in the course of my research, which is coming out as a book soon, on the case studies of different district councils, including the Bodoland Territorial Council. Now, in the northeast of India, another process has been very helpful and indigenous, that is signing of ethnic peace accords, that the government of India, state government and the rebels, sometimes bipartite, sometimes tripartite, ethnic peace accords have been signed. And the Nagas, they showed the way in 1947. From then on, a series of ethnic peace accords have been signed. Sometimes one has failed, another one has to be signed. So that way, these peace accords, I read the text of the peace accords, and it was found out that the language in each case irrespective of the size of the tribal community, was the rhetoric of classical self-determination, that we are a nation, we are self-conscious, we have a culture, we had a history, glorious history, so on and so forth. So that was the basis, legitimacy basis of the claim, and that was included that in the terms of agreement that they would be recognized, the language would be recognized wherever possible. There would be self-government as per 6th schedule of the Constitution. 6th schedule has been amended many times in order to accommodate, incorporate newer bodies, and this is also accompanied by powers, autonomous powers, and to self-govern their local customs, land, resources. In many cases, as per the schedule, they also have some kind of quasi-judicial powers. So such kind of experiment, it has mostly worked in the northeast of India, except one example, that is Bodoland Territorial Council. In the case of the Bodoland Territorial Council, there was a fundamental defect in institutional designing. In this case, a minority was accorded the political majority status. That is, a Bodoland Territorial Council was accepted in 2003, and the council had 40 seats, has 40 seats, out of which 30 seats are reserved for the minority Bodos, because Bodos have lost their majority status on the northern bank of the Brahmaputra river, and they are minority in all the 4 districts where they are concentrated. They are minority, about 30%, and the rest are 70%, comprising of various other communities, Santals, Muslim, Bengalis, Assamese, and all that. So this created, I mean, before Bodoland was created, accepted, lots of violence, killing and killing, ethnic cleansing. It took place as a result of that. Many of the Bodos and the non-Bodos, they are sheltered in government relief camps, even still now. So this council was constituted, but once in power, the Bodos began to engage in ethnic cleansing in order to transform themselves into a majority, which was difficult. So that was an ill designing, and therefore it could not produce the right kind of governance results. By contrast, in other states of Northeast India and also other such tribal councils that I have surveyed, but I'm not going to talk about those tribal councils here, I have found out, statistically speaking, on the basis of both governmental and non-governmental official and unofficial reports, that from 1981 to 2011, these 30 years, there has been more or less a good performance by the northeastern governments in the northeast of India. I have used the measurement of, statistical measurement of Dr. Rajiv Malhotra, who prepared India's social development report, and I collected the data, prepared the tables, and some graphs which are available in the slides. There I have found out that most of the states in this area, even when they were considered as asymmetric states, some of them are still, most of them were special category states, the status that was withdrawn by the current government in Delhi, and asymmetric states. So the special favorable funds from the center, it was not simply misused, it also was translated into governance and development. So in terms of the measurement of how better it was governed, how we distinguish between governance, several indicators have been used: rule of law index, assault on women, disposal of cases, and also access to social and other opportunities. And a combination of these variables into one major index called Public Policy Effectiveness Index And there it is found out, quite surprisingly, that many of the states actually better performer than Andhra Pradesh or Gujarat. For example, Nagaland in 2011, it was found out that it had the highest record of rule of law, while in Andhra Pradesh and Gujarat, they have developed in other spheres, but their rule of law index was abysmal. So this governance measure has also combined into the accommodation of ethnic identity, conflict management. So it has worked. And as a result of that, what we have found out is a method of territorialization of ethnic conflicts. So you resolve the conflicts where it is located with recognition, autonomous powers, and jurisdiction. I give one example here about tribal district councils in Tripura. It was, I think, one of the earliest ones. It was constituted in 1985. And these tribal district councils, these tribal district councils, it actually comprises 2/3 of the territory of the state. So the tribals are actually governing in 2/3 of the territory, and the state government is governing in 1/3 of the territory. And I have visited those places and their proceedings, how they discuss things in the council meetings in both English and Kokbarak languages, Bengali English and Kokbarak languages. So it was a success story. But the thing is that despite these many rounds of creation of territorial units and territorial power sharing, in the northeast of India, the problems as a whole remains unresolved because there are tiny little areas with some tribal group, each demanding a government of their own. And when I have found out that government means more public money, you spend much more money. So this money comes from the center mostly and from the state government. They implement many of these empowerment and development programs. So accommodation, I mean, there is a limit where one should draw the line, because if one goes on forming governments, tiny little governments, never able to govern themselves without the money from the center of the state, it does not solve the problem. I will finish with reference to one agreement which was signed in 2015, I think the last Naga agreement. It's not in the public domain, but what is heard is that there the Nagalim demand was considered. Now, what is Nagalim demand? That is a Naga federation. There is a Nagaland state, but there are also Nagas in the neighboring states of Assam, Manipur, and Arunachal Pradesh. They have the district council government, but nonetheless, the Nagas demand that all these territories are to be amalgamated to Nagaland. I mean, if it is created, if that is really considered, it would actually open the Pandora's box that India will no longer be a multicultural federation. Thank you very much.